Hey, you're a freelancer, right? I've heard things about you.
What kind of things?
Some of the Arcanists said you stopped a cataclysm. Or a giant Ursix. Or both.
That was me, yeah. It was, kind of both.
Interesting. You're one to watch. I don't want to say too much just yet, but be mindful. A lot of eyes will be on you soon.
What does that mean?
It means this is the time to show what you're made of.
You've got a contract for me. I'm happy to hear it.
Not a contract, exactly. Have you ever heard of the Path to Glory?
It's like a ranking of Lancers, right?
That's not all it is. There are certain rewards offered to those on the path.
Rewards offered by who exactly?
The Emperor. Put yourself on the path, Freelancer. What you do will matter, I promise. So, you're the one after all. I thought it might be you. The Grandmaster talked to you?
I talked to him, yeah. What's this about?
You've been making waves. Opening the gates of the Fortress of Dawn? Not bad. But reaching the inner sanctum? All kinds of wheels started turning in Antium when you did that.
What do you mean? Why would anybody in Antium care about me?
I mean that wheels literally started turning inside the palace. Ardenvasa built some device to tell him if a worthy Lancer appeared. I hear it told half the city.
Great. Now I get to worry about disappointing the Emperor.
I told you he'd be watching. Now it's just a question of what you do next.
I get the feeling that's where you come in?
Well, that depends on you. I guess it's time to properly introduce myself. I'm the Lawkeeper and storyteller for the Legion of Dawn.
The Legion is gone. It broke apart centuries ago.
The Lancers left the path, it's true. But there have always been a few souls tasked with keeping the Legion alive. Ardenvasa left the wheels ready to turn for a reason. The path of the Legionnaire has been waiting, like the doors at the Fortress of Dawn, for a worthy Lancer.
I passed all the tests. I was welcomed into the Legion of Dawn already. Sort of.
The trials proved you're worthy to become a Legionnaire, but you're not one yet. You know the stories of General Tarsus. Do you know the tales of her most trusted council?
I've heard their names. Children's stories, but I don't think that's what you're asking.
You should know whose footsteps you're following. At the height of the dawn, countless Lancers flocked to the banner of General Tarsus. All who had the heart to fight were given a place, but a few were more than just Lancers. These were the boon companions of Tarsus, walking the path as she did, the Legionnaires.
In the trials, Ardenvasa said something about walking the path too.
You opened the doors, but it's not enough to pass the tests. You must keep walking, day after day. Ardenvasa, builder of the first javelin, the first emperor. Sanadine, whose swiftness inspired Corvus. Medeiros, Magnastral, and Leotrail the Unbroken. They all had one thing in common. They shared the ideals of Helena Tarsus.
And you want me to do that too?
Follow in their footsteps. Become a Legionnaire. So many eyes are watching you. If you can do this, revive the path of the Legionnaire, maybe the glory days of the Legion are only beginning. Medeiros was the son of Arcanists. He had lived his entire life in a cavern, underground, hiding. At 10 years old, he had never seen the sky or an Urgoth or any beast but men. The world was utterly unknown to him, except for tales of horror and woe. But among the stories warning children to hide and obey their parents, Medeiros heard one other, a whispered tale of a rebellion against the Urgoth. and a legion rising to set all people free. So, at just 10 years old, Medeiros left the safety of the Arcanists to find the Legion of Dawn.
His parents couldn't have just let him go, could they?
They forbade him, of course, but he picked his moment and ran away. Raised to be a scholar, he knew how to read the secret signs of the Arcanists. He followed them through the wilds to the Legion of Dawn. Or he tried to, anyway. The Chimera had a different plan.
Right, I'm sure this story doesn't start with a child killed by a chimera.
That would be a much shorter story than this one. He'd never seen a chimera. He'd never even seen a grabbit, but he was a very good student. He learned all the warning signs that he was being hunted, and remembered stories about laying false trails. He led the chimera on a long and winding path through the rocks, back and forth. He could never shake the creature, but it could never find him. Then, the other hunters came. General Tarsis, in the first javelin ever made. Testing her new armor, she found the chimera stalking the boy.
Lucky for Medeiros.
No luck about it. Tarsis followed his trail, just as the chimera did. She was just learning the javelin. No one knew what it could do, not even the man who made it. Not trusting her suit's strength in a fight with the chimera, she lured it into chasing her instead. While it ran after Tarsis, Leotrel found the boy and spirited him away to safety.
After all that, he just went home again? That's not much of a story.
I said safety, not home. They took him to their own camp, where the Legion hid at the time. When Tarsis asked where he lived and who his people were, Medeiros replied, "You are my people." The others tried to persuade him to return home, but after a long moment, Tarsis said, "He is home." From then on, Medeiros served as a page to the Legion of Dawn. Eventually, he became a Legionnaire himself. But that's another story. You've walked the Path of Valor. By now, I suppose that's not really a surprise. It's time to tell you how the Freelancers began. Medeiros was raised by the Legion of Dawn. He witnessed Tarsis testing the first javelin. He was at the general's side when the fortress was built, earned his own javelin, and fought beside her, even at the Battle of Antium Pass. Of the company that stood with Tarsis and held back the Urgoth, only Medeiros survived.
Who else was there? The tales always make it sound like Tarsis fought alone.
You already know the others. Evenia, Atinia, Ganes, and Kerif. The Guardians, legends call them. I heard you found all their tombs.
I did, but nobody told me they all died at Antium Pass.
In grief, the Legion tore itself in two. Half went with Magnastral, half with Arden Vasa, and one Legionnaire, who went with no one. Medeiros stayed at the Fortress of Dawn, even though the gates were sealed and the Lancers gone for good.
We're really at the part where someone sits in an empty, locked building?
He didn't stay there long. He was the first Freelancer. Contemplation wasn't his strength. Alone in the courtyard, Medeiros heard a distant roar.
Okay, that's better.
It was a sound he remembered, for it haunted his dreams. The roar of the chimera Cindermore, the monster that stalked him long ago.
The same one? Was still alive?
It vanished for more than a decade, but with the general's death, it returned.
This time he faces it down and wins.
Not exactly. Alone, he stood no chance. But the city of Anshar lay helpless in its path. He had no choice. He found the chimera's trail and followed it, not to the monster, but to its lair. For he knew that if he silenced the relic that created it, Cindermore would lose its power.
That's all great. If the ruin was empty.
That was the problem, yes. Medeiros found the relic, though the monster was right beside it. But he had plenty of experience in laying false trails. Medeiros woke the Chimera, and it chased his false tracks while he slipped past and silenced the relic. Syndamore fell, and the Lancer finally defeated the beast that stalked him long ago. In that moment, Medeiros knew his calling, to walk the Path of Valor, even if he walked it alone. Of all the Legionnaires, Magna Strahl was the most renowned for her feats of strength. But it wasn't always so.
I've only ever heard about Strahl leaving the Legion. Nothing about what she did before.
Bastion likes to forget that she was ever a Legionnaire. The Dominion, that she was flawed and human. But she was many things. Loyal and a deserter, ordinary and legendary. She came to the Legion of Dawn as a young girl. Her village was raided and everyone taken. Almost. She was so small she hid inside a basket. The Urgoth surely caught her scent, but they thought her too weak to bother taking.
They don't tell this story much in the Dominion, do they?
As I understand it, the Dominion banned stories of Magna Strahl's early life. Alone, unarmed, she followed the secret Arcanist signs to Sanctuary, where the rebels hid and plotted. There, Strahl begged Tarsis to let her join the Legion, to grant her vengeance. But the general refused. She said Magna wasn't ready, and sent her away. Strahl couldn't accept that. So she went out alone to fight the Urgoth.
Without a javelin? That's insane.
She set traps, ambushes. She poisoned spears and knives. Any small advantage she could take against a vastly superior enemy, she gladly took. She nearly died dozens of times, but vengeance drove her onward. And the Urgoth fell. She carried trophies to the Sanctuary, day after day, week after week.
Poison and stealth do not sound all that mighty.
Remember that for General Tarsis, the trial of might involved luring enemies into a trap? Might isn't just simple feats of strength. It's achieving your goal with whatever means available. Finally, General Tarsis spoke with her. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want to join the Legion of Dawn," Magna replied. Tarsis looked at her and asked, "Why? You already have your revenge." The general looked to the many, many Urgoth trophies Strahl fought for. At first, Strahl had no answer. Then, after a long moment, she said, "It's where I belong." To which Tarsis answered, "Then you're finally ready to join us."
So what happened? How did Strahl end up leaving the Legion and founding the Dominion?
That's a story for another time.
What do you think you're doing? You're damaging those books. Stop that at once.
I need to mark my place.
Don't fold the pages. Use a bookmark like a civilized person.
Bookmarks fall out.
Are you juggling them? No? Then they'll be fine. Use a bookmark.
So, now that you've walked in her footsteps, let me tell you the final tale of Magna Strahl. When General Tarsis fell, those closest to her went into mourning. Each carried grief in their own way. For Magna, the loss of her friend and leader turned to rage. She couldn't rest while a single Urgoth lived. They were already broken by the sword of Fulminus, terrified, fleeing to the dark corners of the world. But hard on their heels, Strahl came, hunting them one by one.
This sounds like the other story you told me.
Listen to enough tales of Magna Strahl and a pattern emerges. When at last her scouts found no more enemies, she returned to the Fortress of Dawn. There she found the doors sealed. The Legionnaires were preparing to leave it forever.
Even after I went inside, I've never heard why the fortress was sealed up.
I'm getting to that part. While Strahl eased her grief with battle, Arden Vasa fixated on his duty. With her final breath, Tarsis had made him swear Antium would not fall, no matter the cost. At her command, Vasa prepared to take the entire Legion of Dawn to safeguard Antium for all time. Outraged at what she saw as desertion, Strahl ordered the Lancers to halt. And they obeyed. Her general secured a future for all people, not just Antium. She called for the Legion to follow her, to battle the enemy in the darkness where they'd fled.
Which then commanded the Legion after Tarsus died? Or was it neither?
No one. We call Tarsus a general because she led the Legion, but they had no ranks. When she died, the Lancers looked to her Legionnaires, but none could replace her. Strahl was admired, some might say revered, by many, and they gladly joined her cause. Vasa called them traitors. Strahl declared those who stayed behind were cowards, and the Legion broke. Those who followed Magnus Strahl called themselves paladins and went north to pursue the enemies of man. They vanished into the darkness and were never heard from again.
How did the Paladins become the Dominion?
I wish I knew that story. I doubt even the Dominion knows it, really. They lost the path. They no longer use their strength to protect anyone, let alone everyone. I doubt anyone in the Dominion even remembers that was their purpose. That's why it's vital that we remember. Strahl's story and the Path of Might cannot be allowed to die.
I'll remember.
Good. Before the Battle of Antium Pass, the Legion's test of resolve had a different basis. It began with Leotrel, the general's oldest friend. When Tarsus first raised an army against the Urgoth, Leotrel was with her. The Arcanists were hidden from them. They hadn't yet found Arden Vasa. No lancers, no javelins, no weapons, no fortress. Not even a good hiding place. Nothing but the vision of Helena Tarsis and Leotrel's unbreakable will.
I've never heard about the beginning of the Legion before.
In a way, it has no beginning. Where and when did Tarsis and Leotrel meet? No one remembers. Maybe it was once such common knowledge that no one thought to pass it on. There are countless towns that now claim to be the birthplace of General Tarsis. The truth is lost. A legion needs soldiers, and it began with just one. The two set out to find the Urgoth. The plan was simple. Follow the raiders and warn villages in their path. At first, they succeeded in getting word of the coming Urgoth to people in time. Villagers fled, but the longer the Urgoth went without a catch, the faster it spurred their hunt. Finally, Tarsis and Leotrel arrived at a town with the Urgoth on their heels. Flight was impossible, so they stood and fought.
Fighting Urgoth without a javelin? By themselves? That took guts.
Tarsis hoped to slow the Urgoth enough that some villagers could escape. The two of them, alone, armed with simple weapons, were little more than an annoyance to the enemy. But they fought. Despite greater numbers, strength, and weapons, the Urgoth could not subdue them. Finally, with Tarsis wounded and Leotrel at the point of exhaustion, the two prepared for the end. But the villagers rallied. With tools and improvised weapons, they joined the battle and routed the enemy. Many innocents were taken that night, but not all of them. Because people fought the inevitable. And the rest is a tale for another time. You've walked the path of resolve. It's a hard one to travel.
You're not gonna tell me about the last stand of General Tarsus now, are you? Because I've heard that story many times before.
No. This is the story of how the Legion endured its own destruction. While Vasa and Strahl fought about which way to take their lancers, Leotrel prepared. She prepared her oldest friend for burial. She prepared places for all the fallen, and she prepared the way for those still to come. She took Garrett's volumes of the Legion from the Fortress of Dawn before it was sealed. She left Helena's signet in the General's tomb, waiting for the right hand to reclaim it.
Are you saying she knew I would need to look for the Javelin of Dawn?
No, of course not. But she knew better than anyone not to surrender to the inevitable. She would not abandon her friend or her path, even though the battle was over. The world would always need Tarsis, and Tarsis would always need Legionnaires. She followed Arden Vasa to Antium for a time, and left the records with trusted lancers, to be maintained and passed down, generation after generation.
To you? This is your story.
Our story. The Legion lives on through us.
What happened to Leotrel?
Once her preparations were complete, her plans in motion, she left Antium and vanished. Like the beginning. The end of her story is a mystery. But it's not beginnings or endings that matter. It's the path you follow between them. So, you've walked all the paths. What do you think?
What was all this for? Why have I been trying to recreate the deeds of Legionnaires?
The Legion of Dawn wasn't one person or one deed. It wasn't even the trials of General Tarsis. It was 1,000 people. 1,000 deeds, great and small, that brought us to this moment. Stories have beginnings and endings, a clear path, an arc. But we know that reality isn't like stories. We only have the path ahead. Nothing is clear, and nothing truly ends. Listen, Legionnaire. This is your tale now. It has been for some time. Learn from the mistakes of our forebears. Persist, even in the face of the inevitable. Walk the path, even if you have to do it alone. Welcome to the Legion of Dawn. There are other stories, other Legionnaires you could learn from, but that's for another time.